Borderlands franchise has sold over 94 million copies and defined the looter-shooter genre for an entire generation. Yet it seems that Gearbox has been unable to recapture the magic of the series for over a decade now. Borderlands 2 is commonly hailed as the peak of the Borderlands franchise, but that came out 13 years ago. After a decade of waiting, I had to ask, what's happened to this series? And will Borderlands 4 finally recapture the magic, or has Gearbox lost their formula forever? But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me show you what playing over 100 hours across every Borderlands game taught me about this franchise. Borderlands started as Gearbox's crazy experiment, mixing Diablo-style loot with a Mad Max shooter. It was a massive gamble in an already crowded shooter market, but man did they have one killer hook. 17.5 million generated guns and a co-op shooter. What? Fast forward 15 years and we've got the second best-selling first-person shooter franchise of all time, with Hollywood movies and billion-dollar budgets. But somewhere along the way, something was lost. So let's go back to where it all started. Let me show you what Borderlands 1 felt like back in 2009. Borderlands 1 was released into essentially a war zone of some of the best first-person shooting games ever made. Modern Warfare 2, Left 4 Dead 2, Gears of War 2, and Halo 3 just to name a few. In the co-op shooter space specifically, Left 4 Dead and Gears of War were dominating with polished big-budget sequels to their established franchises. Then along comes this cel-shaded cartoon game that looked like a comic book. While everyone else was fighting for realism or grit, Borderlands did something extremely different. Somehow this little experiment carved out 2 million sales in that brutal landscape, not by trying to beat Call of Duty at its own game, because nobody could at the time. But Borderlands 1 didn't just succeed in that war zone of FPS games, it created an entirely new genre. The looter shooter didn't exist before this game. Destiny, Warframe, even Battle Royales can trace their DNA back to this experimental game. I hadn't touched Borderlands 1 since probably 2010, and I was 8 years old, so booting it up again felt like visiting an old lost friend. I almost forgot just how banging that intro was. Probably the best intro to a game of all time. Unfortunately, can't really showcase much of it here as that song is 1,000,000,000% copyrightable, and I like money. The first thing of note to me when replaying this legendary game was that the gameplay actually didn't feel that dated. It wasn't the most complex of games, but the general loop was still really fun. Shoot things, get new loot occasionally. Use new loot to shoot things. Repeat. This pretty much sums up all of Borderlands in general. The gunplay here actually felt surprisingly solid for a 15-year-old game. The movement's a bit stiff, the guns don't really feel like they have any weight to them, but there's something satisfying about the combat when you hit that crit and you watch their head explode. What really hooked me though was the variety. Every weapon drop felt like it could change how I wanted to play the game. Finding a new rifle with different stats or an elemental weapon that had a chance to burn people. Do I go for the high damage sniper build or switch to this rapid fire SMG? The game constantly made me rethink my strategy. I think Borderlands 1 nailed the core loop that would define the entire genre really freaking well. Kill, loot, level, repeat. But more importantly, it had confidence in its vision. There were no focus groups telling them to tone down the weirdness or up it, but don't get me wrong, the game had some problems. The movement was stiff, the story was underdeveloped, questing was just tedious side missions, and the characters' ability trees are pretty underwhelming overall. And here's the thing, Gearbox was about to fix all of that. And how would Gearbox follow up this genre-defining success? By releasing one of the greatest video games of all time.
Broken,
3 years later, Gearbox dropped what many consider the perfect sequel. Borderlands 2 didn't just fix the problems from the first game, it revolutionized the entire concept of what a sequel could be. Better story, better characters, better missions. Critics praised it, fans worshipped it, and it became the gold standard for how to do a sequel right. This was Borderlands firing on all cylinders. Where the original proved the concept could work, Borderlands 2 showed what happened when the concept was fully realized. Playing through Borderlands 2 today, it's easy to see why everyone calls it a masterpiece. Every single gripe I had with Borderlands 1, gone. The gunplay felt like a genuine improvement, bullets had weight, weapons felt satisfying to use, every shot mattered, the skill trees were vastly improved. Maya's phase lock ability to trap enemies was infinitely more interesting to me than Lilith's basic invisibility before you augment it down the tree. But here's what nobody talks about really. Borderlands 2 quietly revolutionized RPG design. Traditional RPGs have a fundamental problem. They lock you into one character build forever, forcing you to live with every decision you make at character creation. Want to try a different playstyle? Tough luck. Start over completely. Borderlands 2 said screw that. Respeccing, changing your character's abilities was cheap and easy. You could experiment, fail, try again, no punishment whatsoever. The mission design evolved beyond the simple go here, kill this of the original, but the real breakthrough for me was cooperative play. Most co-op games have a scaling problem. Either become trivially easy with friends or create horrible balance issues where adding players breaks everything. But Borderlands 2 cracked the code. More players meant more enemies, exponentially better loot, and pure chaos that somehow it still felt like fair. It was like perfect scaling. Every additional friend felt like they were adding to the experience rather than breaking it, making co-op feel like an essential part of the game rather just an optional tack on. 2 words for you: handsome Jack. But Jack wasn't just a great character. He was a design innovation that fundamentally changed how villains work in games. Before Borderlands 2, game villains were sort of like cutscene decorations. They showed up, delivered their monologue, and disappeared into the next story beat, minus a few teasing moments in your ear throughout the game. This made them feel distant, impersonal. Jack pioneered something we now take for granted: the constant antagonist presence. Always there. He was commenting on your actions in real time, taunting you through your radio, making every single moment feel deeply personal. At the start of Borderlands 2, Jack seemed harmless, quirky, basically an evil claptrap, cracking jokes and acting like some cartoon villain you'd see on Saturday morning TV.
Where's your husband now?
He's dead.
That is a heartbreaker. But you got something in common with him now, at least.
You're almost laughing with him rather than fearing him. But that's exactly the trap. You underestimate him completely. Jack very quickly develops into an absolute monster, and that transformation makes him infinitely more terrifying than if he'd started out as pure evil. What made Jack truly horrifying wasn't just his constant presence. It was a systematic destruction of everything players loved about the first game. Jack didn't just create new problems. He methodically targeted every beloved character from Borderlands 1, one by one. He was working on a hit list. He made it personal by making it nostalgic. He abused his own daughter Angel, a siren, whose abilities he exploited to charge the vault key, ultimately forcing us to kill her to stop him. And in retaliation, he murdered Roland in cold blood right in front of us. He turned Bloodwing against us and then killed Mordecai's beloved pet right in front of him. That's brutal. He slaughtered Tiny Tina's parents. He attempted to corrupt Lilith and turn her against us. He forced the sheriff to kill Brick's dog Dusty. He indirectly manipulated Shep Sanders into selling out New Haven's location to Hyperion, resulting in the town's complete destruction. And then when Brick found out, he gouged Shep's eyes out and cracked his skull open, leading to Brick being banished from Sanctuary for his violence. This was deliberate character assassination, literally. Jack wasn't just some new threat. He was actively dismantling the world and characters that players had grown attached to in the first game. Every familiar face from Borderlands 1 either died, suffered, or was corrupted by Jack's influence. Your hatred for him rose to criminally high levels because he was destroying your connection to the series itself, all while maintaining that same jokey tone that made you underestimate him initially. The genius was simple. Jack made every victory feel personal because every loss was personal. When he's constantly in your ear making quips about naming his diamond-encrusted horse Butt Stallion, you're not just laughing, you're seething, because you know exactly what this monster has done to everyone you cared about, and he's still joking. It wasn't just good writing, it was a design innovation that games like Portal 2 with GLaDOS, BioShock Infinite with Comstock, and countless others would take inspiration from. Jack proved that the best villains aren't just obstacles to overcome, they're personal tormentors who systematically destroy everything you hold dear while never losing their sense of humor. And the humor. This is where Borderlands 2 solved comedy in games by understanding something most developers miss completely: restraint. It wasn't just random equals funny, which is what most games try to do. The game understood strategic comic relief that enhanced rather than undermined the core experience. Where Borderlands 1 used humor occasionally and it was more subtle, dry humor, Borderlands 2 found the perfect balance. Characters like Claptrap became genuine comedic relief, while other characters would constantly mock, torture, or literally make him shut up. It all played off each other brilliantly, creating a comedy ecosystem where every joke felt earned and purposeful and funny. The loot drops in Borderlands 2 felt infinitely more satisfying than the original. Sure, Borderlands 1 had the same color-coded system, but something about the way Borderlands 2 presented those legendary drops just hits different. Getting a legendary in Borderlands 1 was nice, but it was kind of forgettable. Getting one in Borderlands 2 felt like Christmas morning. The visual effects were more dramatic, the sound design made each drop feel like a proper event, and the weapons themselves felt more distinct and memorable. But what really separated Borderlands 2 from its predecessor was how it used space. Both games used a hub-based design, but Borderlands 2 made each area feel alive and filled. Borderlands 1's levels often felt underutilized, large spaces with scattered enemies and long stretches where nothing was happening. Borderlands 2 packed every corner with intention. Enemy placement felt deliberate, cover was meaningful and in useful locations, and 95% of your time running around, you were shooting something or being shot at. You were never more than 30 seconds away from combat, loot, or some kind of interaction. The side quests exemplified this perfectly. On paper, they were still the same go here, grab this, kill enemies, return loop as the original, but somehow they felt like completely different. For the longest time, I couldn't figure out why. The key for me was integration. These quests didn't feel like detours, they felt like natural extensions of what you were already doing. Take an early quest where Sir Hammerlock asks you to collect Bullymong fur. It's a simple fetch quest, right? But halfway through, Claptrap interrupts your radio, trying to convince you to give him the fur instead. Then Hammerlock counters, offering one of his best sniper rifles if you stay loyal. Claptrap desperately re-interjects with a shotgun offer. Suddenly, this basic collection quest becomes a comedy routine with some actual stakes and meaningful rewards for your choice. The genius was that these quests rarely felt out of the way. You were going to be in that area killing Bullymongs anyways for XP and loot on your way to the next area. The side quests just gave context and personality to actions you'd normally take. Instead of mindlessly grinding enemies, you're now part of a ridiculous bidding war between two NPCs, and your choice actually matters for your loadout. This to me is what made Borderlands 2's quest design feel so much better. It's the same basic gameplay loop, but they wrapped it in character interactions that made every objective feel purposeful and entertaining. The audio design tied it all together. Most games treat audio as kind of like an afterthought. Functional, but forgettable. Borderlands 2 made audio a character in itself. Weapon sounds had punch and personality. You could tell a Jacob from a Malawan just by the audio. The voice acting brought every character to life, and the music knew exactly when to amp up the energy and when to let the comedy breathe. Borderlands 2 for me had perfected the formula, but in doing so, it also set an impossible standard that would haunt every game that followed. So when it came time to make another Borderlands game, rather than try to immediately top Borderlands 2, Gearbox decided to step sideways. They outsourced development to 2K Australia for a prequel that would fill in the backstory between games. This seemed like a safe bet. How could you mess up more Borderlands? The pre-sequel actually surprised me quite a lot. Going into it, I was expecting something subpar compared to the rest of the games. But 2K Australia didn't just phone it in. They genuinely tried to innovate within the established framework. The low gravity mechanics were genuinely fun. Bouncing around in 0G while doing 180s trying to shoot people never got old. I also really appreciate that you could just shoot a psycho's oxygen bubble and watch them start dying. There's something darkly satisfying about weaponizing the environment itself. What really caught my attention were the mechanical changes they introduced. The cryo damage type wasn't just a cosmetic addition, it fundamentally changed combat strategies. Freezing enemies solid and shattering them with melee attacks felt viscerally different from the standard element combos we'd grown used to. And replacing relics with Oz kits was brilliant design. Instead of just another stat modifier, which it is, your oxygen supply became part of your loadout strategy. Do you prioritize longer air supply or boost your slam attacks for more aggressive play? Speaking of slam attacks. Finally, a new traversal option that felt distinctly Borderlands. The satisfying crunch of dropping on enemies from low gravity height added a whole new layer to combat positioning. Though I'll admit those constant lava puppies started to piss me off after a while. But the real genius of the pre-sequel was in its storytelling approach. You're not playing as the heroes this time. You're literally playing as the future villains. Wilhelm, Nisha, Claptrap, and Athena would all become antagonists or morally compromised characters by the time of later games. There's uncomfortable moral ambiguity running through the entire experience because you're Hyperion employees, complicit in Jack's rise to power. And getting to play as Claptrap, after years of him being the annoying comic relief, finally experiencing his perspective was both hilarious and oddly touching. His skill tree was completely unhinged in the best way possible. Random effects that could either save you or completely screw you over, perfectly capturing his chaotic nature. The real masterpiece though was Handsome Jack's character development. This wasn't just backstory for the sake of it. Watching Jack's gradual transformation from someone who genuinely believed he was the hero to the megalomaniac villain we knew from Borderlands 2 was genuinely compelling. You could see exactly what drove him to that level of insanity, and the uncomfortable part was that some of his reasoning actually made sense. Plus, everyone being Australian just was chef's kiss. The voice acting and humor had this distinct flavor that set it apart from the other games. However, the pre-sequel also revealed some concerning limitations to the formula. Most of the game takes place in this one moon, and while the low gravity mechanics kept things interesting, the environments did become repetitive. It felt smaller in scope compared to Borderlands 2 diverse planets, and the campaign was noticeably shorter too. It felt more like substantial DLC rather than a full sequel. The enemy variety was also kind of disappointing. It was mostly rehashed psychos and bandits with some new Hyperion units thrown in. And at launch, there weren't any in-game raid bosses, which was a significant step back from Borderlands 2 robust in-game content. The side quests, while decent, lacked those iconic, memorable moments that made Borderlands 2 special. What it lacked in environmental variety, it did make up for with some genuinely memorable individual bosses, but that highlighted another issue. The pre-sequel was good Borderlands, but it wasn't anything revolutionary. It had the exact same gunplay, the same gameplay loop for the most part, and the same brand of humor. 2K Australia had perfectly captured the Borderlands DNA, but they hadn't evolved it in any way. So what did this mean? Did Borderlands reach its peak? Was there any way to actually improve this formula? The pre-sequel proved that Borderlands' recipe was perfectly replicable. Another studio could nail the mechanics, the tone, and the loot system, and produce something entirely competent. And maybe that should have been a warning sign. If you could outsource Borderlands to another studio and get a perfectly fine result, what did that say about the formula? Was it becoming too predictable, too systematic? The pre-sequel was technically solid, mechanically sound, and narratively interesting, but it lacked that special spark that made the first two games feel essential rather than just competent. Before we actually answer that question though, it's time for Telltale Games to get their hands on the Borderlands franchise. Now, if the pre-sequel raised questions about whether the Borderlands formula was becoming too systematic, Telltale's approach to the series was the complete opposite. Tales from the Borderlands took the series' most beloved elements, its characters and writing, and asked, what if we made that the entire game? And it might have been the smartest thing anyone has ever done with the franchise. In Tales, you play as two characters. Reese, this corporate wannabe who thinks he's hot shit but is basically just a walking anxiety attack with a robot arm. And Fiona, a con artist trying to pull off the biggest scam of her life while everything spirals completely out of control around her. And the dynamic between them really was just chef's kiss. And the whole story is actually told through the lens of both these characters talking to the masked kidnapper. This unreliable narrator thing where they're both telling this story but constantly interrupting each other to call bullshit on the other's version of events, it was really brilliant.
I propose that we form an alliance for the return of the funds.
Capital. Really? Is that what you're going with? Because I remember it a little differently.
What really made Tales special for me was how it handled some of the existing Borderlands cast. Seeing handsome Jack again as this digital ghost haunting Reese, manipulating him while also being hilarious was peak writing. But then Scooter's death had me actually crying. This is what game writing should be. The writing was really on a whole nother level entirely. Every single character felt fully realized to me, even the minor ones. Loaderbot becoming this unexpectedly emotional centerpiece of the entire game, Vaughn being a genuinely good companion to Reese, and Sasha being the competent one of the group holding everything together. Though I will say, if I get jump scared one more time by Shade, I'm gonna crash out. That scary motherfucker. Tales really did end up being a masterclass in the way to use Borderlands humor without it feeling overly cringy or overdone. It was more so focused on character-driven humor that naturally emerged through stress or the events of the story, but it did still capture the Borderlands feel. Even early on with the reveal of Vasquez killing Henderson by pushing him out the airlock, with very convenient comedic timing of him floating by mid-conversation. This is all really just to say that the finger gun scene, the entire Hyperion corporate culture satire, Reese's pathetic attempts at being cool, it all worked because it came from his deep-rooted character traits. The choices actually mattered too. Who you trusted, how you handled conflicts, whether you embraced Hyperion corporate culture or rejected it. These choices shaped not just the story, but how characters saw you and interacted with each other. Your Reese could end up as a completely different person depending on your choices. But maybe most importantly, Tales understood what made Borderlands special in a way that some of the main games didn't even grasp. It knew that beneath all the guns and explosions and psycho screaming, Borderlands was fundamentally about found family. About misfits coming together and somehow making each other better, even when they're all varying degrees of criminal and insane. Tales from the Borderlands was everything the series could be when it stopped worrying about loot drops and focused on the best version of itself. It was proof that you didn't need to revolutionize the formula, you just need to understand what the formula was actually about. So here we were. Two different studios had taken the Borderlands IP in completely different directions, and both had succeeded. 2K Australia proved the formula was solid enough to outsource and still work, and Telltale proved you could strip away everything people thought made Borderlands Borderlands and still capture its essence. If outside developers could handle this IP well, surely Gearbox, the creators of the series, would knock it out of the park with their return to the franchise. After years of letting others play in their sandbox, it was time for Gearbox to reclaim their creation. The question everyone was asking wasn't whether Borderlands 3 would be good, it was how they'd manage to top what they already perfected in many fans' eyes.
I put it on the line, every shot, every climb, ain't no rest in my grind, broken staff, I'll ride or die, I put it on the line.
Borderlands Borderlands 3 seemingly had everything it needed to improve upon Borderlands 2 and be a hit. On paper, this was supposed to be the peak of the series. You had the tightest gunplay the franchise had ever seen, then you added movement upgrades like sliding and ledge grabbing, which made combat feel much more dynamic than the running gun loop of 2. The Vault Hunters themselves got some of the most customizable skill trees yet, with the addition of augment slots to give you a sense of tailoring a character to your own playstyle. Mechanically, Borderlands 3 is a big step forwards, but as anyone who's played it will tell you, mechanics are only half of what makes Borderlands. The other half is the writing, and unfortunately, this is where the game tripped over itself. The problem wasn't that it lacked humor. If anything, it had way too much of it. When you make every villain, every quest giver, and every big battle walking punchline, then suddenly nothing feels important. Humor in games is like hot sauce. A little bit elevates the dish, but dump the whole bottle in and it ruins everything. That's why Handsome Jack from Borderlands 2 works so well. He was funny, charismatic, and constantly mocking you, but at the same time, he was ruthless. He blew up cities, he killed characters you cared about. You laughed at him, but you also feared him. That's a villain you want to take down. Borderlands 3 replaced him with the Calypso twins, two hyperactive Twitch streamer style villains who seemed more interested in being loud and obnoxious than actually menacing. Honestly, they reminded me of Rough Nut and Tough Nut from How to Train Your Dragon, except if they were millennials live streaming on TikTok. They're funny in short bursts, but when you're forced to listen to them for 30 plus hours as the central thread of the story, it becomes exhausting. Imagine watching a full-length movie where those two were the leads. You'd be clawing your eyes out by the halfway mark. But the problem doesn't stop there. The entire writing team seemed to lean into this cringe comedy approach. Long, drawn-out quests about someone's coffee addiction, endless side jokes that drag the pacing to a halt, dialogue that feels like it's part of a cohesive narrative, and more like the writers were competing to see who could sneak in the dumbest internet reference. It creates this whiplash where the gameplay is urging you forward, but the story keeps forcing you to sit down and listen to gags that just aren't funny. To be clear, Borderlands 3 isn't a bad game. It sold well, it plays great. The Vault Hunters themselves are solid additions. I personally love Flak with their Beast Companions and Zane with his trickster gadgets. And I appreciate that Zero, one of the coolest characters from 2, got a bigger spotlight this time around. The bones of a great game were there, but when you put it next to Borderlands 2, it's hard not to feel disappointed. And that's the key point. If Borderlands 3 were a completely standalone game with no legacy to compare it against, people would probably judge it much more kindly. The same way Star Wars sequel trilogy might have been considered fine if it wasn't shackled to decades of expectation. Borderlands 3's biggest flaw is simply that it isn't Borderlands 2. It doesn't surpass it, and for fans, that's always going to sting. Which brings up an interesting detour in the series' history. Before we can talk about Borderlands 4 and whether it fixed these problems, we need to look at the side games that filled the gap. The first one, a Borderlands 2 DLC that grew so big, it eventually became. So, Tiny Tina's Assault on Dragon Keep pretty much gives you exactly what you got from the Borderlands 2 DLC, except this time you don't need to grind up to level 30 just to play it. Instead, it was repackaged as a convenient standalone title so anyone could jump right in without committing to the full Borderlands 2 campaign. It's more than just a repackaged DLC though. The game has slightly different leveling systems, some small tweaks to progression, and of course the signature Bunkers and Badasses setup. If you're not familiar, Bunkers and Badasses is Gearbox's spin on Dungeons and Dragons, with Tiny Tina herself as the unhinged dungeon master narrating the adventure. That premise alone gives it a ton of charm. You're not just blasting through another wasteland, you're living inside Tina's imagination. She'll change the world mid-quest depending on her mood. What makes it stand out is the humor and tone. Borderlands has always leaned into comedy, but pairing that with a D&D parody let Gearbox flex some of its best writing. Tiny Tina is one of the most beloved characters in the entire series, and this was the first time she got to truly run the show. It's got the same gunplay and looting you'd expect from Borderlands 2, but wrapped in a meta tabletop-inspired layer that made it feel like more than just another DLC. And that experiment eventually set the stage for something bigger. Tiny Tina's Wonderlands. Where Assault on Dragon Keep was essentially Borderlands 2, Wonderlands went all in on the D&D parody. This time you weren't stepping into the shoes of an existing Vault Hunter, you gotta make your own custom character. Gearbox introduced full RPG style classes from Stapomancer to Spore Warden, complete with their own perk trees and build paths. I went Spore Warden myself, and it honestly felt like a system Borderlands was always meant to have. Wonderlands also carried over Borderlands 3's improved gunplay and movement, but layered it with spells, melee builds, and all kinds of new loot. It felt less like a spin-off and more like Gearbox asking, what if Borderlands was a fantasy RPG, but with guns? And surprisingly, it worked. After Borderlands 3's constant barrage of try-hard jokes, Wonderlands was refreshingly silly without being grating. The campaign was fun, the humor landed more often than not, and at the end of the day, it nailed the core loop. kill things, loot things, and then kill more things with your new loot. They proved that Borderlands could branch out into different genres while still keeping its soul intact. And honestly, if Gearbox ever wanted to make a straight up RPG outside the looter shooter mold, Wonderlands showed they could probably pull it off. But before we get too excited about potential futures, the next step in the series wasn't a fantasy adventure. Instead, we're heading into the spiritual successor to Tales from the Borderlands, a very different kind of experiment called New Tales from the Borderlands. An experiment it must have been, because they took a beloved title of Tales and just shit all over it. Curb stomped it into the pavement. The game is just boring, uninteresting, essentially a long collection of side quests that you can't skip with two very unlikable main characters, and then Fran. We like Fran, and the TD were grunts. But besides those two, the rest of the cast is just blah. I really wish they just called the game something else. It's just a legacy tarnish on the old Tales game. It's trying to sort of build off the legacy of the old game, but in a game series like Borderlands, how is the main plot of your goddamn story gonna be about this scientist trying to make a gun that doesn't do what guns are supposed to do? Just kill people. To me, it just felt like a weird concept for a plot to begin with. We play Borderlands to fuck shit up, laugh a bit, and have a pretty good time with a serviceable story. Instead, New Tales gave us bad gameplay, no laughter, at least 100 cringes, and the worst narrative of the entire Borderlands franchise. I don't mean to just shit on games, but god damn, this sucks. And the Steam reviews share the same opinion. This is the only Borderlands related game to actually have mostly negative Steam reviews. Even Borderlands 3 with the god-awful Calypso twins didn't achieve negative Steam reviews. New Tales truly is a game of all time, so much so that I don't even really want to talk about it any more than I want to play it now. So let's move on to something much more interesting, especially after such a bad showing with New Tales. I want to finally introduce you guys to the game that can either save this franchise from mediocrity and its slow decline into irrelevancy, or sink the ship fully. Borderlands 4.
I ain't no hero, never claimed the name, just a broken staff in a broken game.
I just want to go ahead and stand up and give a round of applause to Gearbox, because this game actually fixes every issue I had with Borderlands 3. It has a stronger main villain in the Timekeeper, and alongside him a much more compelling plot. It has the best gameplay, the best gunplay, and some very serviceable vault hunters. I personally played my time as Rafa, the soldier. Now sit your ass back down, because before I get to glazing, we need to discuss some issues. Or well, one issue. Developing a game in Unreal Engine 5 nowadays seems like the greatest red flag in terms of how performance optimization will be day one. I didn't actually have too many problems myself, minus like 3 crashes over 6 hours. It was mostly stable, even while I was streaming and recording at the same time as playing. But I can't just ignore what's been riddling other players. But I am certain that after a few small updates, they will end up amending the issue. Now, let's get on to glazing, okay? Unzip those pants, boys, because Gearbox did it. They finally made a game that actually feels like a genuine improvement over Borderlands 2, at least in my opinion. The Timekeeper is amazing. The setup for the whole initial plotline is awesome as well. It goes through the usual intro cinematic where the VHs are fighting the enemies, and then boom, you get locked into some sort of stasis thing. The Timekeeper takes you back to his base and installs this spinal chip into you, which allows him at any moment to take control of you, and if you dare rip it out, you turn into a Ripper. It's essentially just a psycho from previous titles. So let's run down the list of my favorite features and upgrades from previous titles. The toilet humor is gone, mostly, and we have actual occasional dry humor in its place. 2, you can spawn and edit your vehicles from anywhere. No more having to go to the Catch-A-Ride. 3, you can fast travel from almost anywhere. 4, you can replay boss fights to get extra loot or to try and get that very specific targeted loot. 5, there's tons of random events scattered across the world to make this open world not feel empty. 6, you can specifically make Claptrap shut up. 7, a very admirable set of Vault Hunters that all seem to be very fun and unique both in gameplay and in character. 8, you've so many new traversal techniques such as the glider, the double jump, the grapple, the ground slam, the sliding, the air dash. These all put together equal a really smooth and satisfying gameplay loop, especially in combat. 9, you can select a loot as trash when you pick it up, specifically for selling at a vendor with one button. 10, the inventory UI is super easy to navigate with lots of new filters to sort your gear. And 11, it's a mostly seamless open world, no more constant load screens between regions, so you can now just traverse the large open world and enjoy your time using the new movement tech. In a time where we constantly have developers that don't listen to fans, that don't take feedback the right way, it's truly an honor to see that Gearbox has put on their big boy pants and made a proper awesome game. I haven't quite beat the game, but I did play a real solid 15 hours already. I do plan to actually beat the game as well, perhaps in another video, but I can already tell this is a great turning point in the right direction for the Borderlands franchise. The open world alone made it feel so much more fun to play, and it all complemented the new mechanics really well. So basically, just want to say Well done, Gearbox. You've had rocky ups and downs throughout the years with your games, but I think this might just be your best work yet. The reviews might be down right now, but if you can fix that performance hitch, I'd happily recommend this game wholeheartedly to everyone. This was my entire journey through the Borderlands franchise, from its killer start to its rocky middle ground to what I believe is the beginning of the return to form for Borderlands. It's been quite the fun experience. Even the games I didn't particularly like, I could still find some fun in, except New Tales. What franchise should I play through next? Comment down below. And if you like this style of video, feel free to support me on Patreon, where you get early access and behind the scenes footage and access to voting polls to decide what video I make next. Thanks for watching.